The cargo bay of the celestial merchant stank of neglect and despair. Rhett Lawson pressed his maintenance scanner against the hull plating, trying to ignore the muffled whimpering echoing from the far corner. The Zafrani crew had assured him the sound was just faulty ventilation, but Rhett had been in enough ships to know the difference between mechanical failure and something alive. He shouldn't have looked. His shift ended in 20 minutes and the freighter would jump to hyperspace within the hour. But curiosity, or perhaps something deeper, pulled him toward the shadows where crates had been hastily stacked to form a makeshift barrier. Behind them he found her. The creature was massive, easily 3 meters long with obsidian fur that seemed to absorb the dim lighting. Her species was unmistakable to anyone who'd studied galactic fauna. A Kethran wolf, apex predators from the volcanic moon of Kethra Prime. Her amber eyes, once capable of striking terror into the hearts of colonists, now held only exhaustion and pain. A festering wound marred her hindquarters and her breathing came in labored gasps. Huddled against her emaciated body were 3 cubs, no larger than human infants, mewling weakly as they sought warmth from their dying mother. Rhett's jaw tightened. He'd heard the stories about Kethran wolves, how Zafrani smugglers captured them for illegal fighting rings, how they were prized for their ferocity and abandoned when they became inconvenient. But seeing it firsthand ignited something primal in his chest. He tapped his comm. "Captain Tixara, this is Lawson. We have a situation in Cargo Bay 3. The reply crackled with annoyance. "Engineer Lawson, your shift concludes in 18 minutes. Whatever you've found can wait until... There's a dying Kethran wolf and her cubs down here. They need medical attention." A pause. Then cold and clinical. "The creatures are cargo property of a syndicate client. They are not our concern. Complete your inspection and return to quarters." "They're living beings. They are merchandise, Lawson." "Damaged merchandise the client chose not to retrieve. We depart in 53 minutes. Do not interfere." The comm went dead. Rhett stared at the wolf, at Vara, though he didn't know her name yet. Her eyes met his, and in that moment he saw something the galactic community seemed incapable of recognizing. Awareness, intelligence, and a desperate plea for help. Every regulation, every protocol screamed at him to walk away. The Zafrani weren't cruel by nature, merely pragmatic. Most species in the Galactic Union viewed animals as resources, tools to be used and discarded. Humans were the odd ones out, the strange newcomers who formed emotional bonds with creatures that couldn't even speak their language. But that had always been humanity's gift and curse, the inability to ignore suffering, no matter how inconvenient. Rhett made his decision in 3 seconds. He worked quickly, his engineer's mind calculating risks and solutions simultaneously. The medical bay was off limits, but he had a workshop with basic supplies. The cargo bay's environmental controls could be rerouted. He had ration packs in his quarters, and while they weren't designed for Kethran physiology, they were better than nothing. First, he needed to move them. Approaching a wounded predator was textbook stupidity. Vara's lips pulled back, revealing fangs that could shear through reinforced steel. A low growl rumbled from her chest, warning him away from her cubs. Rhett knelt slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Easy, girl. I'm here to help." He didn't expect her to understand his words, but tone mattered. He'd learned that growing up on the frontier colonies, where humans had domesticated everything from earth dogs to Centauri crystal serpents. Trust wasn't built with language, it was built with consistency and respect. He opened his ration pack and tossed a protein bar toward her. Vara's nostrils flared, analyzing the foreign scent. Hunger won over caution. She devoured it in 2 bites, then fixed him with an expression that might have been confusion. "Yeah, tastes like recycled cardboard, I know," Rhett muttered. "But it'll keep you alive." Over the next 40 minutes, he performed a miracle of improvisation. He jerry-rigged a hover sled from cargo equipment, coaxed Vara and her cubs onto it with food and gentle words, and transported them to his workshop, the one place on the ship where his authority was absolute. He cleaned Vara's wound with antiseptic foam, applied a dermal regenerator he'd modified for broader species compatibility, and set up a nest from thermal blankets. The cubs, sensing safety for the first time in days, curled against their mother and fell into deep sleep. Vara watched Rhett with those luminous amber eyes, her expression unreadable. When the celestial merchant jumped to hyperspace, Rhett was in his workshop monitoring Vara's vital signs on his scanner. When Captain Tixara summoned him to explain the missing cargo, he stood his ground, citing salvage rights and humanitarian protocols from Earth law, none of which technically applied, but sounded official enough to give the captain pause. When the Zafrani crew muttered about the humans' irrational attachment to beasts, Rhett simply shrugged and returned to his work. Days became weeks. Vara's wound healed with remarkable speed, her strength returning as Rhett adjusted her diet and ensured she received proper care. The cubs grew bold, tumbling around the workshop and investigating everything with puppy-like curiosity. And slowly, impossibly, trust formed. Vara began following Rhett around the workshop, her massive form moving with surprising grace between workbenches. When he sat to eat, she would settle beside him, close enough that he could feel her warmth. When sleep finally claimed him at his desk, he'd wake to find her watching over him, a silent guardian. The breakthrough came during a plasma conduit failure. Rhett was shoulder-deep in a maintenance shaft when the emergency klaxons shrieked. A coolant line had ruptured, flooding the corridor with toxic vapor. He tried to retreat but collapsed, his respirator compromised. He woke in the medbay, gasping for clean air. The doctor, a skeptical Zafrani named Kess, stood over him with an expression of bewilderment. "Your creature," Kess said slowly. "She dragged you out of the contaminated zone. Activated the emergency bulkhead seal with her paws. If she hadn't..." The doctor trailed off, clearly struggling with the implications. Rhett smiled despite his burning lungs. "Her name is Vara." From that day forward, the crew's attitude shifted. They watched as Vara's cubs played in the corridors during off hours, bringing an unexpected warmth to the cold metal ship. They saw how Vara responded to Rhett's commands with intelligence that rivaled any crew member. They witnessed something the wider galaxy had forgotten, that loyalty and courage weren't exclusive to so-called civilized species. When the Celestial Merchant finally docked at Frontier Station Osiris, Rhett filed the paperwork to claim Vara and her cubs as recognized companions under human law. The Galactic Union's bureaucrats protested, citing regulations about dangerous fauna. Rhett's response was simple. He submitted footage of Vara saving his life, testimonials from the crew, and a legal brief arguing that sapience came in many forms. The ruling took months, but eventually, humanity's stubborn refusal to abandon those they'd sworn to protect won out. Vara and her cubs were granted protected status, the first Kethran wolves in history to be recognized as companions rather than commodities. Standing in his new workshop on Osiris Station, watching Vara's cubs chase each other through the cargo bay while their mother rested beside him, Rhett understood something profound. The galaxy might never understand why humans couldn't walk away from suffering. They might always see it as weakness, as irrational sentiment. But Rhett knew the truth. Compassion wasn't humanity's weakness. It was their greatest strength. And sometimes having second thoughts meant making the first right choice.